It's 7:21 a.m. This is the Now Morning Show. Rokas, Natasha, and Kimberly in your company, and we are talking about the return to schools. We have with us in studio this morning the first Vice President of TTUTA, Mr. Marlon Seales. Good morning, Mr. Seales.
Good morning, ladies. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Now Morning Show.
Thank you, and thanks for having TTUTA.
Of course, definitely. I think, this is a conversation that is nationwide right now. I mean, obviously, yes, globally, people are talking about returning to school, but we're just delving into it right here in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think one of the first things that everybody wants to know is, how does TTUTA feel about the reopening of physical schools? Do you think that the nation is ready?
Yes, well, TTUTA and our education committees, we have been planning for this eventuality for quite a while now. Looking at the global landscape, we saw what happened in France, in Europe in particular, what is happening in the United States, in particular looking at the Boston education system. We saw the return of schools, and we recognize that Trinidad and Tobago is actually one of the last jurisdictions start back the physical reopening of schools. So we were planning, we were in front of the game, and we are looking forward to what will be happening next term.
Yeah, definitely. I know a lot of children are excited, so I'm assuming teachers are excited as well.
Yes.
Now, tell me something. What were some of the key things that were considered by TTUTA working towards reopening of schools?
Right. So we looked at two basic areas. First of all, we looked at, from the beginning of the pandemic, we were concerned about education recovery. We recognized that with students out of the classroom, without that physical interaction with their teachers. And let me pause for a cause now. One of the things the pandemic would have shown was the importance of the classroom teacher. We recognized all the time, we thought that if we infuse technology in education, that education would have gone. There were even conversations that the classroom teacher could be redundant with the infusion of education, and persons could self-learn. But we recognize with the pandemic, and the figures are there, clear to show that there was approximately a 5 to 10% drop when we look at our major exit exams, right? So the classroom teacher is the critical component in this education system, because the other things stayed. So we recognize, and we would like to applaud on behalf of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, applaud the classroom teacher and the importance that they would have played in the whole education process. Yeah.
Now, as you mentioned, there was a drop when it came to students. So now that schools are reopening and we're going back to the classroom, are there any plans in place as to how we're going to reel those children, bring them back in?
Yes, there is a plan. The CARICOM actually have what we call a Let's Reap program, a whole program, series, a system of education recovery. The association, from the jump, asked the Ministry of Education to partner with us and other stakeholders in the whole idea of education recovery. The response was less than stellar, right? So the ministry and the Minister of Education formed the committee at somewhere in early 2020, early 2021 actually, and that was it. No further meetings, even though we know the Let's Reap program, we know what needs to happen in the Let's Reap program. So we again, and that will be one of our recommendations on when we meet with the ministry on Thursday, that we really look at a comprehensive recovery program in terms of the education system. Let us do it purposely. Let us do it systematically. Let us not just give it lip service, right? The other concern we have is in the area of health and safety. We are in a pandemic. Yes, we are moving to endemic. That's what it, yes. So we are moving to that stage where we will be living with the disease, but still, for the two persons who would have died yesterday, their families are 100% affected. So we need to protect our babies. How do we do that? How do we open schools safely for both students and we are teachers organization, so for our members? How do we do that? We need to get into that conversation. And tangential to that will be, there are things that we learned in the whole COVID experience that we really will want to keep. So for instance, the infusion of technology, how that happened, the use of online teaching modalities, remote teaching modalities. How do we keep the things that we want to keep? That cannot happen by the way, because we know the Minister of Education said we are going back to pre-COVID. So the things that existed in the system on February 2020, that is where we are at now. But in the estimation of the association, that might be a regressive step if we do not keep the things that really worked in the education system during the COVID-19 period.
Now, Mr. Seales, I was actually going to ask about the concern for safety, as some of the parents and the teachers and the students will be mixing. And I know we are actually going to be having some vax and non-vax. But I know you're going to put that in your recommendations on Thursday. So ahead of the meeting on Thursday, can you give us any more indication about what are some of the other things you're going to bring before the education officials? Right.
So first of all, we will need some clarity.
Right.
The guidelines will have spoken towards physical and personal space, but how do we get personal space when we are sitting shoulder to shoulder, all right, in the classroom? I know the teachers may be able to protect themselves by pushing their classes back, putting up a screen, but really we need to do a little better, all right? How do we, while there were, in the previous guidelines, there was a suggestion of staggering the break times and the lunch times. Maybe that is, and we will suggest, the association will suggest that original idea is a good idea. What you need to do is get the scaffolding for that. So we'll need extra personnel, so supervision personnel, right? Those are some of the ideas that we will bring to the Ministry of Education. We really hope that this time, instead of just taking note of it, that we really have an opportunity to action them out.
Yeah, because I know one of the things that that the education minister mentioned, of course, was whole of school assemblies. And she also mentioned the return to sports as well. So I was wondering how that's going to work if it is really supposed to be having that personal responsibility and that personal space.
Correct. So they really would need to give us some clarity on that. We have examples. So for instance, I visited the Mokrapo East Secondary School, and the principal there, Mr. Taylor, he had assemblies that were year group assemblies. So instead of having the whole school out, he had just the fourth formals out on a particular day while broadcasting the rest of the assembly to the rest of the school. That's an awesome idea, where we can get limited, where everybody can participate, but we have face-to-face interaction with a smaller group. So there are ideas out there. We need, what the Ministry of Education will need to do is to actually listen to the stakeholders rather than roll out their plans without the input, the conscious input of our stakeholders. What they need to do is stop putting out their plans and then hoping that one of the stakeholders also in alignment with them so that they could see that consultation was done. Again, we need to do better for our education system because there was a gap. Nobody can say the otherwise. There was a gap. We need to recover that gap, and we'll need all hands on deck to do that.
Now, Mr. Seales, have you been touring the schools? Are they ready for school to be open in 2 weeks? Have the proper furniture been supplied, those sort of things?
So let me be, I'll be careful, right? We have members throughout the country, right? We, through our networks of our district chairmen, so each educational district, there's a person in charge from the tutor point of view. We have our DFOs, our district field officers, persons who are on the ground, and the teaching fraternity, 90% of the teaching fraternity are tutor members. So we have our feedback, right? What is actually happening, not what will be portrayed for a touring team of a ministerial touring team. You know, we'll put our best foot forward when our supervisors and ministers are coming, but what is happening behind the curtain, we are aware of that, and that is what we will articulate to the ministry officials when we meet them on Thursday, please God. Yes?
Nice. Good.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, there is so much to unpack here, I think, as we continue to just navigate going back to school, and looking forward to seeing both of you being able to work together so that our children are able to benefit, because that is the most important thing. Mr. Seales, thank you so much for being with us this morning on the Now Morning Show. We appreciate you. Trinidad and Tobago, stay tuned, because Shamla Mirage is up next with Unique, Not Different. This is the Now Morning Show. We've still got roughly half an hour left together. Stay tuned.